Hello, hello. You're still here. Thank you for being here. This is a topic that I have to say is very important to my heart. So I haven't prepared very well, which I think is the lovely part of being the moderator, because I'm going to do very little talking. But very curious about misinformation, disinformation, and what's happening in our world when it comes to what I call the end of the truth. Now, fake news is nothing new, but it seems that we're hitting the era of fake news on steroids, where deep fakes and technology and the bias of algorithms of social media can lead us to places where it's actually becoming really difficult to know what's real and what's not. And when you look at the implications of that, it just takes us into very dark places in terms of hate, in terms of discrimination, in terms of really creating a big divide between us humans in ways that probably is not the best for a human society. So I want to jump in right away and start maybe with you, Lama.
Sure.
When you're a journalist, so in the good old days of journalism, the whole idea was being proud to provide an objective and accurate story, right? This is becoming very difficult nowadays. Have you personally been exposed to, or do you know in your work of people, of journalism being affected by fake news or misinformation or disinformation?
I'm glad that you brought up this point. You're completely correct. Misinformation isn't something new. I mean, we've had it. I can't speak from personal experience, but before the digital age, obviously misinformation was present, even in text, even in print journalism. And it can be sourced from multiple reasons. I mean, it's not always intentional. It can even be sourced from, even in conducting an interview. For example, the interviewer, the journalist could mishear someone, they could misunderstand someone, and that could lead to it being published and it being misinformation. A personal experience? No, I haven't. I mean, I know that's not the answer you're looking for, but I haven't.
No juicy stories?
No, not personally. So for me, I know a lot of news outlets prioritize being first. For me personally, as a journalist, I do work for Arab News, and we do prioritize accuracy and being first. But personally, my priority is accuracy. I work in politics, I work in foreign affairs, so it's very sensitive. I have to make sure every detail is precise. So personally, no, I haven't experienced like writing in misinformation. But we have. I mean, the case that I've seen most recently with a fellow journalist from another news outlet was misinterpreting the interview. So sometimes when you're listening to someone, if you don't directly quote them, you paraphrase. And that paraphrasing, if you paraphrase it incorrectly, leads to misinformation. Misinformation leads to misunderstanding. And then it skews the trust that people have in media over the long run. I hope that answers your question. I mean, there's a lot we could talk about.
Do you think we should mistrust media?
Do I think we should mistrust media? I mean, I work in media, so I hope not.
I'm asking, so yeah.
No, I don't think you should have a mistrust of media. I think you should have, with anything around the world, we should be skeptical. Okay, we should always be skeptical. I know this is not something people want to hear. Do your own research, gain a better understanding. At times, you do have to have a certain level in media, but that comes over time. It's our job to also build trust with people. We're not always 100% accurate as journalists. We do the best that we can. If you're a journalist and you're following the correct path of journalism, you want to be an accurate source. You want to be a trusted source. You want to provide information that people can trust around the world remotely, that they can seek. And that comes over time by building trust. So I hope people can trust the media, but again, have a level of skepticism with like everything else in the world.
I love that. I think that's a word of honesty said very, very well. Shaunelle, you lead an organization that's called Media Done Responsibly.
Yes,
Yeah.
Media Done Responsibly.
So the name assumes that it's not done responsibly all the time, but also that it can be done responsibly. So can you tell us a bit about what you do and why you do it?
Absolutely. Media Done Responsibly is essentially about social responsibility in the media. And when I look at the word responsibility, I don't just look at it in terms of accountability, but we take a look at it deeper, our ability to respond, right? Who has the ability to respond to the media, to social issues, and the ways in which they're being represented. Originally, I started off as an organizer of a campaign. So I'm at the intersection of digital literacy and media literacy, digital wellness and digital well-being, as well as social justice and love. And I started with a campaign of young people who were tired of, in particular, this was before we started Media Done Responsibly, but in particular, the ways in which women of color were represented in media and in music videos. And so there was a hypersexualization, and these were the only ways that they were able to see themselves represented in the media. And so when we started talking about social responsibility and media that's done responsibly and accuracy, we want to go deeply into, are we just looking at a single story? Are we looking at a stereotype? Can we get beyond that stereotype and look at the full human being, and what does that mean? And so going back into this view of transparency, making sure that we are accessing the full lives and lived experiences of humanity, as opposed to kind of our lower, quicker nature, what is going to be salacious, what's going to get a bunch of eyes. And just kudos to you for the work that you do in maintaining proper journalism. A lot of times, the role of the journalist was very close to the heart of the citizen, right? Like, we could have that trust to turn on the news or to open a newspaper and to see what the story is that's going to impact our lives. And a lot of times, I think, especially now in social media and people wanting to get clicks and views, a lot of times, not necessarily with journalists who have been properly trained and, but sometimes other people who are not official journalists will put out information that's not correct and create salacious headlines. And so part of our work is to train the community to look at that, find out who the source is. Is this coming from a legitimate news source? How can I find out more information to let me know that this is accurate information as opposed to misinformation or even a disinformation campaign?
Do you believe that misinformation and disinformation are affecting polarization, are affecting racism, are affecting misogyny, and so on and so forth? Give us a bit of an example on that, because in reality, you could actually think that these are things that are underlying currents in the society that are actually reflected on misinformation and disinformation. Is it that way, or is it actually increasing our polarization?
Right, that's an excellent question. When we look at racism, we'll just take that as an example. In some senses, racism is a form of polarization that has been built and sustained by misinformation and disinformation that's been sustained over time. I'm from the United States. African American folk and Black people who are there, many of us come from and are descendants of the African slave trade. And in order to maintain a system of dehumanizing and denigrating human beings, there had to be a campaign of disinformation about those humans.
Correct.
And a huge part of that disinformation campaign was that these are not humans at all. These are 3/5 humans. They cannot be citizens because they are not full human beings. They don't feel pain, so the torture that they're experiencing, they're not feeling at all. It is the God-given right of people who are oppressing them to oppress them, right? And so they're entitled to do that. All of that is this misinformation and disinformation that's been a part of society. And I think it's important for us to study the history of that, because now that it is playing out in our digital spaces, it's amplified, it's happening quicker. It is causing not just fear in a small group of people, but people all over the world are concerned about what's happening with AI, what's happening with the advancements in technology. Is our world going to change? Yes, it is changing. And so part of what I look at and the way that I frame this is, if I'd like to just posit, as our humanity evolves, and if it can evolve at a rate that is equal to the advancements in our technology, then we can begin to lay the foundation of digital wellness, of digital well-being, of digital flourishing.
That's such a beautiful way of saying
So if essentially our EQ, right, our emotional intelligence, can move at the rate of AI's intelligence, then we can then begin to lay this foundation and create a sense of equilibrium.
That's such an incredible way of looking at it, that our world is moving faster than our ability to be human is moving. I think that's really interesting. Kate, you also look at that in your work. So the idea that when we're misinformed, or misinformation, disinformation, will sort of almost break our humanity system and lead to hate and hate speech and so on. How does that work? Tell me a bit about your
So
work.
I love that you said what you said, because I'm just going to take that and make it bigger. So mis and disinformation, it fuels hate. And we have seen causality between mis and disinformation, then online hate speech, then offline hate speech. So if we take an example that feels innocuous, which is the COVID-19 pandemic, and we look at how hate speech intersected with that. So it started with conspiracy theories about the Chinese government, about 5G, about quite mad things that were completely illogical. And people really bought into that mis and disinfo because it was inspiring their fear. They want answers, they want someone to blame, and so they latch onto mis and disinfo to give them an answer. But what we found is that extremists latched onto those conspiracy theories, linked them with minority groups, and highlighted characteristics, cultural characteristics, religious behaviors in those groups to spread misinformation, suggesting that those groups had spread COVID-19. And what we saw was a direct correlation in hate crimes against those groups, against anyone from Southeast Asia, against Muslims, against black people, against everyone, anyone from any minority, because all of these extremists were galvanizing, leveraging this opportunity, this fear, this anxiety, to turn it into hate speech. So we saw hate speech happening online, and then we saw it happen offline. And there's been some amazing studies in the US and in Germany that have shown, for instance, when someone of extreme political power, for instance in the US, I won't name names, speaks about minorities in a way that is disrespectful or hateful, then hate crimes directly correlate, they increase. And I'm not talking about hate crimes online, I'm talking about hate crimes on the street. So there's a direct correlation, which is terrifying. That's the power of mis and disinformation and how it translates and turns into hate. And we just need to think about this dissemination of information. It's wonderful what you're doing in terms of educating. It's wonderful what the media are doing in terms of educating. But there's a lot more we need to do to keep up with the tech, because the tech is moving at speed and it's allowing people to share this information at speed, at scale, and it's prompting hate all over the world, to all minorities, to anyone with a protected characteristic. It's terrifying.
Yeah, actually, that's again very eye-opening. It's very intriguing as well, because when you see the problem this way in that scale, if you look down at the core of who I am, I'm a scientist. I want facts and figures and numbers, and right? And I'm completely being confused, because as you broaden your perspectives with all of the knowledge that comes in, take any topic like dieting and the diversity of all of the issues, and you can't actually make up your mind on what's true and what's not, right? But then when it comes to the way you ladies are describing it in terms of how it impacts on what it means to be human, on the ethics of humanity, on hate, on the, on polarization and so on, the topic is actually a lot, more nuanced in terms of how we deal with it. So how do we deal with it? And I'll ask the expert, and I will have to ask, a personal question. So I have a few people like yourself that I trust. So if you give me information, I will trust that information, or at least I will be open to receiving it from you. The problem is that the algorithm is not showing you to me all the time, right? There are those echo chambers, if you want. Like if I sort of either myself or the algorithm designer wants me to see things in a certain way, I'm not always going to see that. So even if you're trustworthy, you're honest in your reporting, how as a journalist can you overcome that? How can you make your word heard in a world where the digital algorithms are creating echo chambers?
The way I view echo chambers is there's two ways to kind of, I don't want to say resolve it, because it's very difficult to resolve. There's two ways to tackle it. There's the tactical, technical side from our friends that can help us over here. And then there's one that's more human-based. I think at times we overlook the power of just human-based connection, the sharing of information between people honestly, without an agenda, without the agenda of spreading propaganda. With these echo chambers, I don't know if everyone knows what an echo chamber are. I think some people may not know.
Yeah, go for it.
I think the best way to describe it is, I want to simplify it very simply in a way that people can kind of understand. Imagine you're in a group of friends, and all your group of friends share a similar mindset, similar values. So while you're having these discussions, you're all going to share the same result, and you're going to think the same way. Over time, that becomes an echo. So you're all talking. Your opinion becomes an echo, becomes louder, and at times it's so loud to where you can't even hear the other side, the other opinion, people that vary from you. So when you have these groups, and we call them echo chambers, I mean, we grew up learning polarization. We didn't, but now recently it's been called more of echo chambers, and that's been more broadly used. When we have these echo chambers between different groups, you're not hearing the other side. So if, I don't know, I want to give you an example. If I think this tissue box is like a square, and you come and you say, no, it's a circle. It's a cube, and you come and you say, no, it's a sphere.
Cylinder.
It's a sphere.
Okay, yeah.
And you're like, and you have a group of people echoing with you that it's a sphere, but I say, no, it's a cube.
I know.
We're not even listening to each other. Our echoes are so loud, we can't even sit down and say, well, let's just look at it. Yeah. Let's share opinions and figure out what is it actually.
You know, this happens online with the flat earthers very clearly. It's like it's a sphere, it's flat. Right?
I think if we have that discussion, we'll be here all day with the flat earthers. I could be here all day talking about that. Yeah. But no, this is the issue with echo chambers. We're not sitting down and discussing. So tactical side, technical side, I think you'd be better to explain it. But more human side, I think encouraging people, go back to the basics, the simple. You know, when we were in school, they taught us, if you have nothing nice to say, don't say anything at all. Sharing is caring. All these mutual lessons. Sit down and listen to someone. I might not agree with people, but I sit down and I listen to them so I can hear their perspective. I think when you break the barrier of these echo chambers, you're building diplomacy. It doesn't have to be within a political view, but I view it political. You're building diplomacy. You're strengthening understanding between people. And over time, that reduces hate speech. That reduces this perception that people have of each other. So go back to the basics. Listen to each other. Media's role in this is much more complicated. With us, is just showing up every day and being an accurate source of information. We're not going to force feed the people the information because that's not the role of media. Our job is not to force feed people information. The information is there. It's accurate. If you want to see it, come see it. But it goes down to human nature. Just tear down those barriers. I think technical side, you'd explain it better in terms of algorithms, the role of social media in creating and fostering these echo chambers. I think the technical side would be better.
I'm happy to step in.
Okay.
So I love what you said, because I think what's really important about this panel, that we're talking about the human experience and the technical solution. And the solution needs to be founded on human research. You know, tech can't operate alone. So there's two things we can do, I think, online to stop this. And it's pre-bunking and debunking. So pre-bunking is a proactive measure we can do to educate people. So I think we make an assumption. Everyone in this room is probably digitally native. You mentioned that you are, because you're young and have experienced the digital world. I'm in my 40s. I'm sort of half and half. But you know, you might have your young son, he's 11, he's seen something online, he's sharing it with his friends, and you think, how can you believe this? Or we've probably all got a grandparent or an uncle or an aunt who is sharing mis and disinformation, and you think, oh my God, how am I going to tell them that this is completely wrong, you're embarrassing yourself, etc. And I think pre-bunking helps with that. So it's about digital literacy. It's about teaching people to interrogate what they see online and understand that not everything they see is true. And we're not just talking about young and old people. We're talking about nations that are new to the digital ecosystem, people living in poverty, people with not access to mainstream education, You know, there's language barriers, there's all sorts of things. We have to be culturally aware when we think about these initiatives. So pre-bunking is something we can do. And I think pre-bunking is educating people about what tactics are used in mis and disinformation. So the tactics, and you talked about this really eloquently earlier, so I don't want to repeat you, but are things like emotional appeal, appealing to you emotionally, are scapegoating, so picking minorities and suggesting the ways that they're responsible for what you're experiencing, othering, creating polarization. And there's lots of tactics that can be used. And I think if we're aware of those tactics, we learn to be, as you mentioned, healthily skeptical about information. But lots of people aren't aware of this. So Google actually did a great thing on YouTube where they had these 90-second videos in their adverts that just very briefly explain the tactics. So they pre-bunked. So people were just scrolling through YouTube. We've all gone down a YouTube rabbit hole. I defy anyone to tell me that they haven't. And we start seeing content, because of engagement algorithms and our negative bias, we keep seeing content that's more and more negative because it keeps us engaged, and that's what platforms want to achieve. So these engagement algorithms are keeping us engaged, and then YouTube stops in the middle and says, did you know that these tactics can be deployed to make you feel this and that way? And people are stopped in their tracks, and they go, oh, now, these are like microdoses of information, because we've got short attention spans. We were talking about this earlier. So microdoses of information that allow us to go, hang on a minute. Now, we might not even know we've processed that information, but perhaps the next video we see is pre-bunked. We start thinking, hang on, I should be skeptical about this. And what AI can do very cleverly is it can target those vulnerable groups, those people who are from new to the digital ecosystem, young people, older people. It can target them with pre-bunking technology, with pre-bunking ideas, and tell them, be skeptical, this is how it works. And we can tailor that messaging to be appropriate to the culture, to the youth, the age, the environment. So it's really, really powerful. And I think we are afraid of AI, I know we are, but we can do it ethically. And I won't go on now, but if I can talk about ethical AI later, I will do.
I'd actually like to veggie back off of both of what you both said.
Amazing.
Just really the work that I do is what you're talking about in terms of digital and media literacy.
Amazing.
Making sure that young people of all ages, right? I'm forever 21, by the way. You all mentioned your ages, so just like the store. But whatever age we are able to think critically about all of the media that we're consuming and understanding the impact that it has on us. And so a big part of that is that healthy skepticism, or what we call critical thinking.
Yeah.
And not just taking the first thing that you've seen and running with it, or not even a lot of times getting a text message and you're sent, or a DM and you're sent an article and you just read the headline and you form an opinion based on that without going deeper. But really training, and I'll use the example of young people. I work with college students in the United States, in Southern California, and we train them to be media literacy mentors for middle school and high school students. And so what that does is it gives young people agency and power to tell these stories themselves, to think critically, and to hear that from one another, as opposed to some adult coming in and telling you, don't listen to this, right?
Amazing.
Or, you know, saying, you should be thinking about this in this particular way. But we lead with curiosity. We ask the young people, what do you see? What do you think is going on here? Do you think that this is an ad or an article when we're talking about content in a what they might think is a magazine or a newspaper? Well, it's the New York Times, so it has to be a news article. Well, actually, no, it's an ad, right? It's a long ad that's made in the form of an article that's making you think that, but at the end of it, you're wanting to purchase something, or you're wanting to watch something on television based on that. And so having an understanding of what the media is, it's a money-making organization, really, right? It's money-making. That's the goal. The goal is not necessarily always, depending on the specific purpose and function of that news article or news outlet or media outlet. It's not necessarily to be warm and fuzzy and support humanity, but that has to be our role. And part of the emotional quotient, the part of emotional intelligence is being self-aware and then being able to manage your emotions. So if I am on YouTube or if I'm on a platform whose algorithm is designed to make me want to stay on there by triggering my emotions of anger and of upset, of an uprising even, I can, one, be aware that this is triggering something within me. And the more I scroll and the deeper I go in it, the more I'm triggered and inflamed by this and yelling and wanting to take action and fired up. The second part of that is being able to manage those emotions. And part of that is having the skills and the tools to be able to do the research to look and find out, is this true? So if there's not this, a tool that pops up there for you saying, be mindful of you're about to go down this rabbit hole, that you within yourself have the skill and the ability to be able to do that. And that is power. And so when young people have that power, it's amazing. I met today on my right over here, the youngest podcaster in Saudi. I don't know if she's in the room right now.
Wow.
Yes. But she talked about how sometimes she gets hate on her social media platforms. And she said, you know what, you haven't really made it until you have some haters. And I just know to ignore them. And then if they continue, then I will give them information to let them know that I'm gonna respond with love, that they're providing misinformation and disinformation. And I said, who is this 13-year-old, But 13 years old, breaking down practical steps to manage and deal with hate online.
I'm really interested in this because I think self-regulation is hugely important, but we have to inspire the platforms to regulate as well.
Oh, 100%.
And I hope you don't mind me jumping in here, but it's just so important.
This is the easiest job ever.
He doesn't want to do any work today. He already told us.
Totally.
So self-regulation is hugely important, but these platforms are designed to be addictive. They're based on gambling, many of them, the infinite scroll. I am addicted to TikTok, and I work in tech, and I work in global well-being. This is a problem, okay? So I can't always self-regulate, because the apps are designed to stop me doing so. And there are many tools that we can use as part of not only education, but we can use. But I just also want to talk about another thing we can do, which is debunking, okay? So that comes after. That's like a reactive response to online hate. And I think if we can, so what that does is it says, this is what you've seen, this is not true. And this is happening across platforms. So I'm really pleased to say that people like Facebook and Twitter and TikTok have embraced this, surprisingly, because they care about engagement. They don't want to lose users. So what they've done is they've said, I'm just going to flag this is an untrue statement. They did this in COVID-19. Twitter does it to Elon Musk himself and flags his content as untrue, which is great, because if you're a young person or all the people we talked about earlier, someone who's not digitally literate, the platform is flagging it for you. And young people trust these platforms, which is actually quite frightening. We were speaking about this earlier. So, okay, debunking works to let you know this is not true. Great. But it feels quite limited. I think there's more we can do. And I think it chimes in with some of the things you've said. And I want to talk about counter-speech. So the media uses counter-speech, which is fantastic. It says, here's a narrative, here's a different narrative. Let's not be biased, let's explore both. But we can use AI to deploy counter-speech automatically, which is insane and amazing. So let's imagine a trigger event's happened. We've pre-bunked the trigger event. We've said this is going to happen. There's going to be the World Cup in Qatar. There's going to be the Eurovision Song Contest in Europe. There's going to be an election in America. You may see some information that will be mis or disinformation or promote hate. That's fine, everybody's aware. But then they start seeing this information. They're starting to think, I'm angry, I feel strong about this, blah, 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 blah. And then, what if we deployed counter-narratives? So what if I am someone who casually uses the internet, and I'm watching the World Cup, I'm a man, I'm watching the World Cup, and I'm annoyed that women are participating, and I start sharing misogynistic content. But I'm not wed to this misogyny. It's not my lifelong belief. I'm a treatable person. I can change my views with empathy, okay? What if AI deployed something that said, how would you feel if someone said that about your daughter or your wife? We have research that proves that this works 65% of the time, so that 65% of the misinformation online could go if we deployed this counter-speech. And how we do it is we triage users. We look at the ones who are non-treatable, the lifetime racist. He's a member of a society. We can't treat him. He's spreading the disinformation. He's the source. We can fingerprint him using AI. We can find where he is. But we can't treat him. He's not going to engage. But we can treat all the people sharing misinformation. We can say, hang on a minute. How would you feel? Hang on a minute. And we can shape those narratives. AI can learn to shape those narratives so they work. And AI, as you know, continually learns. So we can use machine learning. We can keep shaping those narratives to change the space. And imagine if we could get rid of 65% of misinformation online, how that would impact hate speech.
Amazing.
So I just think that's huge, and it's something that we should definitely be speaking about.
We have 2 minutes left, so I'd like to get a very short nugget of gold, okay? So we have the journalist, the educator, and the techie, okay? If you would give the audience one nugget of gold on what is the top tip to live in a world where there is so much misinformation and so much disinformation, what would that be?
A top tip, you said? I guess for the general public, I think deciphering between fact and opinion, and I think we hear it so often at times, and people don't know how to decipher. I'm bad at recollection, but I think there was a case study done by Oxford University. It was Reuters Institute, Oxford University, and it said that 20% of public figures, meaning politicians, celebrities, influencers, 20% of their posts during a time frame, it was during a conflict time frame, 20% of their posts had misinformation in it, but that 20% wasn't just 20%. It actually, their posts made up 70% of all social media interaction for that time frame. So those posts were circulating, whether it's through reposting on Twitter, whether it's reposting TikTok, commenting on it. So 70% of user interaction of posts was misinformation being spread at that time frame, all from 20% of public figures. Opinion for people, I mean, my tip, excuse me, would be deciphering between what's fact and what's opinion. Look at it. Is it proven? Is it research-based? Can we trace it back to any studies? Or is it just a celebrity that I really like that said, this is happening, and then I reposted it because I like her, and now everyone that I follow thinks it's a fact. Please decipher. That would be my best advice.
Beautifully said.
Beautiful.
Yeah, Shaunelle.
Yes, beautifully said. I would say support media literacy and digital literacy education. Really advocate for that, because it's wonderful that we are in kind of an echo chamber of our own, right? Talking to where I'm from, we have a phrase, preaching to the choir, right? That means the choir already knows the sermon, right? But we're telling it anyway, but making sure that those who are outside of rooms like these have the tools and the access so that we can work in conjunction with technology that is doing good in the world. The other thing I would say is a big part of the work that I do is have civil dialogues, conversations with people who have polarized viewpoints. Yeah. But it's not a debate. It's leading with curiosity, listening first, understanding that sometimes we have similar values, but we go about things in different ways. And it's okay if I have a difference than you have. I can hear you out, I can listen. I don't have to change my view. I might, you know, but then I also speak authentically what my truth is, and we can understand the context of that. And what we find is when people don't have the defense mechanism of I have to prove my point and I have to win you over, I can just express who I am, I can express my ideas and thoughts and allow you to do that same in a non-judgment environment, then we more openly receive information, learn from others, oftentimes maybe shift our perspectives, kind of, you know, work with some folks who were a bit more willing to shift and to change, and we can learn and work together in supporting that foundation of digital well-being.
Love that so much.
Kate, 1 minute.
Okay, so I would say, from my perspective as a corporate techie, I'm loving hearing from these perspectives. The human element is so important. Technology is your friend. Don't be afraid of it. There are many apps, many solutions you can use to limit your time online, to challenge mis and disinfo. Use technology. It's not your enemy. And I would say the hope that I have is that if we do deploy AI to pre-bunk and debunk, then we as humans might start doing it ourselves, because people are scared to engage online, right? We don't want to be cancelled. We don't want to fight. Like you said, there's not healthy conversations. They're not nuanced online. I don't get to say my piece and you say yours. I'm going rah, 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 and you're going rah, 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 and we're not listening, as you said earlier. But maybe if we see AI deploying counter-speech, we might be brave and deploy it ourselves, and then we're all engaging in healthier conversations online.
Lovely. I absolutely love this. Thank you so much. This was a wonderful conversation. My top tip is differentiate between words and actions. A lot of people around the world, especially where I lived in the corporate world, will tell you that they're doing certain things, but they're actually not doing it at all. I have not, in my 35 years in the business world, been in a panel that is all women teaching us so beautifully, so wisely. So well done, Saudi Arabia. This is it, doing what we say we're going to do. This is amazing. And I will tell you openly, this topic of end of the truth is really one of the top topics you should think about today. It really is going to shape your mind, shape your heart, shape your relationships with others, shape your relationships and perceptions of countries and communities and everything going forward. So make it your priority. I think we got massive tips today. I'm so grateful for what you shared. This is incredible. Thank you for attending. I hope you enjoyed it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.